Hello and welcome to the Just Got Paid podcast. I'm your host, Eric Hillan, and today's message is special. We're in February, we're approaching Valentine's Day. What better time than to talk about money and marriage? Your relationship actually has the biggest impact to either you remaining broke, living paycheck to paycheck, or actually building wealth, investing, becoming a homeowner, and accomplishing your financial goals. And so this episode is very important. I'm going to use this time to get transparent about my own kind of upbringing, my marriage and relationship, and talk about what's worked. The good thing is, I've had a lot of influence in different relationships, whether it be through church or through my clients. And so I've had a lot of experience in seeing other relationships, how they work, why they may not work, and then seeing kind of those red flags and how to avoid them or overcome them when it comes to your finances. So that's really what I'm going to be diving in today with. I want to really start out with a statistic that I heard recently. I was on Instagram and caught the attention of a doctor, Dr. George Frazier, and he was speaking at a Black Enterprise event, and he was talking about the influence of marriage on income and household wealth. And he was talking about specifically how Black families, Black households are at the bottom of the food chain when it comes to income and wealth in the household, but also how it has a direct reference back to being the lowest or the least likely to be married in the household as well. And so how that had an influence on that. And so I do want to read a couple of stats because I think that they're important for me to get specific and get right. And I think it'll be important as we open up this episode to really touch on this, to understand why it's so important that you get your relationships and your marriage aligned financially so you can build wealth. So the biggest thing that he said was marriage has a direct impact on your household wealth. In fact, the wealthiest households are most likely to be married households. And so he talked about different cultures, and the number one culture that had the highest rate of marriage at 94% also had the highest income and wealth. And that household income was about $114,000 on average. That's the median throughout the country. And this is just in America, by the way. That household, that culture were East Indian families, East Indian marriages. So those households actually had the highest income, but also had the highest rate of marriage in those households at 94%. Second to that were Chinese Americans that had an average or median income of $110,000 and their marriage rate of 70%. So they were second to East Indian. Third were white households that had a median income of $88,000 and average marriage rates of about 50%, almost 50%. Next to them were Hispanic households. Hispanic households had a median income of $61,000 and their marriage rate was actually 69%. So they actually had a higher percentage but a lower income in comparison to white households. But the lowest of these was Black households. Black households only represent 34% of these households. 34% of Black households in America have married couples in them. And their median income is only $55,000. And so there's a direct influence there between marriage and income here in America. And the sad part is Black households used to have an 85% marriage rate here in America just a few decades ago, about 20 years ago. And on its current trend in the next 20 years, they're expecting marriage rates in Black households to be in the low teens. So this is alarming. This is definitely a crisis because it also aligns to other statistics that were put out by the Urban Institute that are projecting Black wealth to reach zero by the year 2053. So about 25, almost 30 years from now. And so we have a crisis on hand. We got to get our relationships together in order to get our finances together. And this makes sense, right? Use common sense. If you're unmarried and you're trying to raise kids, or you're just operating out of two different households, you have double the expenses. You're probably paying double rent, or even if you're both owning, those are additional expenses for electricity, cable costs, and all these other things. So you're paying double the amount that you would as one household. So if we can get our relationships together, we can make marriages work, especially in Black households. Then we can continue to increase our net worth and our income in these households. So to give you a little background, personally, I've been married now for going on 19 years. We actually celebrate our 19th anniversary this month. And when me and my wife got married, we were young. I was 23, my wife was 21, and we didn't really have, great finances. We didn't have, great careers. We were really young and kind of going through the motions of working. I was, working in graphic and web design. And so I really wasn't in the career that I'm in now. Over the years, we've had challenges. There were times where we were actually homeless and on welfare and just living paycheck to paycheck and struggling to get by. And so those were some of the lows that we've had. But some of the highs were, we've made several $100,000 a year. We've invested, we've bought and sold real estate. We've done all these other things too. So we've had lows and we've had highs, but most importantly, we understood each other financially. We've always been on the same page financially. So, there are different personality types. These are money personality types, and I'll get into those in a second. But we've understood our personalities. We both like to spend money, but we both love to invest. That has always been our ultimate goal. When we look at real estate, even in the houses that we've lived in, we've always looked at them as investments. And so we are true investors. Sometimes our income fluctuates because I'm in real estate and entrepreneur, and cash flows aren't always there. But so we have had to make decisions based on that. But we love to invest, and we understand the importance of investing and building personal generational wealth that you can pass down. So you got to understand each other and be on the same page. Not that you have to be the same, when it comes to your finances, but you just have to understand and be on the same page and have the same ultimate financial goals. So let's jump into that first topic. The first thing I want to talk about is this idea of being fully compatible as a couple. A lot of the stuff that I talk about today is going to be good information that you need to know going into a relationship. One thing about marriage, and one thing that I've always heard is marriages are easy to get into, but hard to maintain. And so just because, you find the one and you're excited to get married, doesn't mean that that excitement is not going to fade. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have problems or circumstances or things that you need to overcome in your relationship through the years in order to make that marriage last. And that's very important, because when it comes to marriages, and when we talked about those statistics, there's a lot of divorces that happen. There's a lot of people who will never get married or have never been married, but there's a lot of divorces as well. And that's what breaks up those households, and then really takes an impact to, the impact to your generational wealth and to your finances. Going through a divorce is very, very difficult financially, emotionally as well, obviously. And so you just want to consider those things. And when you're matching up and when you're dating and you're single and you're thinking about, is this person right for me? I'm going to have some questions that you should be asking, and that'll help out in that process. So again, I mentioned the personality types. There's 3 different types. There's either savers, spenders, or investors. So which one are you? Are you a saver? Do you consider yourself a spender, or do you love to invest? And the way to do that, the way to ask this question, as you're in the dating scene, is to ask somebody, hey, if you came into a windfall of money, let's say $1 million, what's the first thing you would do? and get their honest feedback. What's the first thing you would do? And you'll be able to really kind of pinpoint which personality trait they are. If their first response is, "Oh, I'd go buy the latest car," okay, well, you have a spender. Or if you have somebody that says, "Oh, well, I wouldn't tell anybody. I tuck some money away into the investment, into the stock market," okay, well, there's an investor. And so you'll get an idea of their personality type and how they would handle money from these questions. Just a simple question. If you came into a windfall, what would you do? What's the first thing that you would spend your money on? Or how would you handle your money? And try to really dive into that conversation so that you can understand their personality type. So that is key number one. As I mentioned, you want to have aligned financial goals. In order to be a compatible couple, doesn't mean you have to have the same personality, doesn't mean you have to have the same upbringing when it comes to money, because upbringings can be very different. Somebody may come from money, somebody may come from poverty. So how are you going to handle those things? The key is having the same goals. So if you're thinking about, okay, I want to eventually become a homeowner, or I want to be able to send my kids to private school, those are the things that you want to talk about early in the relationship, because you want to know what those financial goals are for that person that you're dating and make sure that you're compatible. So the biggest thing about compatibility when you're in the dating scene is to talk about money early and talk about it often. So I often get questions, hey, me and my wife, we're just on different pages. How do we get on the same track? And so I always go to foundational things. You know, if you guys are currently, and we'll talk a little bit about this in a second, if you guys are currently doing your own thing with your money, meaning you don't know what the other person is earning, you don't know what they're spending their money on, the first thing you have to do is set up a weekly money conversation. Sunday evening, make it fun. Go out to a cafe or your favorite park or beach or wherever you can go, but set some time in the calendar to have a conversation about money. It's a very important aspect of your relationship and eventually of your marriage, or if you're already married, it's going to create a pattern of being open and freely talking about money. So put something in your calendar, make it a priority to attend, and make it fun. Don't make it a chore, because if you make it a chore, it's not going to get done. Second question that often comes up is, okay, I have these financial goals in my relationship. We're trying to figure out, what do we do first? And so this is really going to be a conversation in those weekly or bi-weekly meetings that you set to say, what do we focus on this week? What would be a win for us financially? Take that into consideration. If you're wondering what you should focus on first financially in your relationship or for financial goals, set the tone early and have that conversation. What are we trying to do this week? What are we trying to accomplish this month? And that way you'll prioritize those goals so you can really knock them out. If you're trying to do too much with too little, it's not going to happen. So you really have to just prioritize some things. You can't say, well, I want to buy a house, but your credit score is a 500. Okay, first let's get the credit score together. Then let's save for closing costs and down payment and earnest money. Then let's talk to a lender. So this is a pattern and it's a process that you can knock out. You break that large goal into more simple things that you can accomplish, again, from week to week or bi-weekly, however often you're doing your money meetings. That's when you want to have those conversations. Second thing that often comes up is, we're making good money, but we kind of do our own thing and we're not sure if we should combine our accounts or combine our money in order to handle our finances. And from my experience, I've seen couples do it several different ways. I've seen couples that do everything together, pay everything out of one account. I've seen couples that do everything separate and they just split up the bills and then they pay those. And then I've seen couples that have their own separate accounts, but then they have a community account, a joint account that they pay bills out of that joint account. And then they kind of use their own money to do what they want. There's no set fashion or format of doing this. I would say do what works best for you. to give you some insight in my relationship and in our marriage, we've always looked at the money that we earn as God's money. This is God's money. This is God's house. Everything that we have belongs to God. So there's no me or mine. Oftentimes, like any money that comes in, obviously our bills are taken care of. And then we talk about the things that are coming up. Like we don't give each other an allowance. We don't say, well, you can only spend this. There are times when, with me being in real estate and being an entrepreneur, where times may get more slim than others. And so I'd say, okay, we need to kind of watch what we spend money on this week or whatever the case may be. And so we have those conversations openly, but we've always looked at money as God's money. And what are we doing with it? How are we going to steward this money? And so that's what's worked for us. Again, there's no one way to do this, but you do need to have a strategy. You do need to have a system that's going to work for both of you. So have that conversation about how you would handle money. If you're in the dating scene and you're having conversations early in the relationship, give some hypotheticals. Hey, if we were together and we got married, how would you want to handle bills? How would you want to handle finances? And have those conversations, because it could be a deal breaker for you. And it's okay for it to be a deal breaker early and have those conversations early. It's worse to now be married to somebody and now having these conversations that you never had in the past. And now, I look at marriage as there's no deal breakers. You got to work through it. And so it becomes more difficult. So have those conversations early, but have them and figure out a system that works best for you. One thing I can tell you is that if you're dating and you're trying to figure out if this is the right one, don't just get married thinking that that's going to fix everything magically. It's not going to happen. It's going to put a spotlight on the problems that you have or the differences that you have. And so that's why it's so important to have those conversations early. Don't get married thinking that that's going to be the solution to your financial issues. Or don't get married thinking that, oh, if we combine our bills, then we'll be saving money. That's not a purpose for getting married. That's a benefit to getting married, but it's not the purpose of it. So don't think that marriage is the magic pill that's going to solve all problems. So, what questions come up when it comes to having separate accounts? Oftentimes people say, well, what if this happens? What if, they have a lot of debt and then now they have these debt collectors and now they're, going after my account? From my perspective, and again, in my relationship, if there's debt collectors coming after your debt, they're coming after our debt. I live in California. We're a community property state. And so our debt is our debt, and so those things, we need to tackle. And it doesn't stop me from wanting to combine our finances, knowing that we're going to have to take on that challenge. If me and my wife had that similar situation, then we'd address it as a team. You got to realize that being married and being in a relationship is a team effort. You guys, if you have the same goals and the same purpose, then you should want to tackle problems together. You should want to enjoy and celebrate wins together. That's the point of being on a team. That's the point of being in that relationship and being married. So definitely consider if there's, debt that needs to be addressed, if there's issues that come up that, you're worried about from your partner, then you have to realize, okay, I'm willing to take on that debt. I'm willing to take on that financial burden for this relationship. And so having that conversation and seeing it from that perspective will help you get through that. So I do want to touch on how debt can affect relationships, because this is going to be lining right into that, and what you can do about it. Because oftentimes we come in, with some baggage, whether it's childhood and upbringing or student loans, right? There's things that you've done or things that you've experienced through life before you met your partner. And these are conversations that you need to have in order to tackle them and face them head on. And so debt, student loans, credit card debt, and even bad spending habits can have an impact on your marriage. And so what you need to do is put together a debt payoff plan together. I talk about debt payoff plans, and I'm actually working on a debt payoff tracker right now that I'm going to put out to the public. But there's a couple ways that you can tackle debt. One is a snowball method. A snowball debt plan is basically saying that you're going to take whatever you list out all your debts, all the credit cards and everything that you have, the mortgage, student loans, everything. Then what you're going to do is take the lowest payment. So, say you have a credit card that has a payment of $25, whatever the case may be. You're going to tackle that debt payment first, whichever one has that lowest payment. And then once that's paid off, you'll pay the minimums on everything else. Don't stop paying everything else. Pay the minimums. Don't pay extra. Put anything extra on that first debt. Once that's knocked out, you're going to take whatever you're paying extra plus that $25 minimum, roll it into the next one, and then so on and so forth. You're going to start knocking out that debt one at a time while paying the minimums on everything else. That's a snowball effect. Now, the avalanche payoff plan is about attacking the highest income. The highest interest rate. So whatever has the highest interest rate, you want to tackle first. And this is a key point because I'll talk to couples who, they want to get into investing. They purchased a home, they want to start investing, and I always say, well, what does your debt look like right now? And the reason why I ask that is because if you have high interest credit cards or high interest personal loans that are high teens, 20, 30% interest, well, the fact of the matter is you're paying that to a company with no additional benefit. So if you took, say, $100 and you want to invest it in the stock market, if you're getting 10 to 12%, you're doing good, right? On, say, a mutual fund. But if your credit card is 23%, you're still losing. You're getting 12, but you're paying out 23. So I'd rather you put that on your debt, pay down those high interest cards and loans because you're going to get the greatest return on your money. You're not paying 23, 30%, even 15% on that debt because you're paying it off. Now you can go and invest because now you've paid off those high interest debt payments. And so you're getting that money back. So you're going to get a better return on your money by paying high interest debt. And that's the avalanche plan. You're going to tackle those, say, 23, 25% interest credit cards or personal loans, whatever the case may be. Tackle those first and then move down the line from highest to lowest in interest. Okay, so that's the avalanche plan. So those are two different debt payoff plans. But the key is if there's debt, and there likely will be when you're coming into a relationship, put together a game plan on how you're going to pay it off. Have an honest conversation, list it out, say, here's all the things that we need to pay, here are the things that I owe, and start to tackle them one by one. That will actually strengthen your relationship, believe it or not. When you start to have some victories and paying off debt, and you start to see some generational wealth being built up in your relationship and your accounts start to grow and different things like that, you'll see that your relationship and that bond will actually strengthen because you've overcome these things, and celebrate them. When you have your weekly or bi-weekly meetings to talk about money, give a high five, give a hug, celebrate the wins that you have along the way. Don't just focus on all the debt and all the things that you have to accomplish. Focus on the small wins, and that's going to strengthen your relationship. So, a couple questions. I know I mentioned, that one about coming in with debt, but I often get a question, what's the best way to create a plan? And, as far as tools go. And it really doesn't have to be intricate. There are plenty of free tools out there that you can use. Like I mentioned, I'm working on a debt payoff tracker myself that's a little more intricate, but I'm gonna put that out as well. But utilize a tool that's simple, that's easily accessible. So I would say if you're not using an app, maybe it's a Google Sheet, something that you can get to wherever you're at. Because when you have your meetings, your money meetings, you may be in a cafe, you may be in a restaurant, you may be at the beach. You want to be able to access that file from wherever you're at because it's going to make it that much easier for you to then say, okay, let's jump into this and let's update it. And then you can save it and move on about your day. So make it, whatever that tool is going to be, just my suggestion, my advice is to just make it as easy as possible for you to access and celebrate the wins. So let's talk about some red flags. If you're having these conversations in a relationship and you're getting some pushback, or you're seeing that, this might be a financial liability or a red flag, you know, let's talk about how to address those. First and foremost, here are some common red flags in relationships when it comes to money. First thing is constantly overspending or just ignoring a budget altogether. You have to set a spending plan. Oftentimes I'll say budget because that's what people know, but have a spending plan for your money. Take a look at it once a month. Use it as a guideline. Yes, life happens and there will be some flexibility, but really try your best to stick to a monthly budget and have a plan for your money going into the next month. Second red flag, hiding money or lying about spending or debt. This one is a tough one. You have to be open and communicate about where money is going, especially if you're in a marriage already. When you're married, it's, I've had couples, clients that actually would tell each other, oh, well, I loaned you that money, or you still owe me from, dinner the other day. And to me, I just can't see how that works. I mean, that's just asking for conflict in your relationship, right? So again, I'm not saying how you should, run your marriage. You have to have a system that works for you, but be careful from adding stress or adding conflict to your marriage. There's already enough going on in life, and especially if you have kids and work and all these other things. So don't try to create more problems. So, it shouldn't be any hiding of money if you have a game plan, if you guys are using a strategy, and if you guys are meeting weekly. If you find out that they're still hiding money or they're lying about spending money, then you need to have a heart to heart conversation and say, look, in order for this marriage to work, in order for this relationship to work, we have to have total honesty. It's no different than anything else. If you found out they were cheating on you or whatever the case may be, honesty is honesty. Trust is trust. And that comes in the form of financial trust, emotional trust, physical trust. I mean, those are all of the same vein. And so you definitely want to make sure that you can trust your partner and they're not hiding money or lying about their spending. Another red flag is always borrowing money and never paying it back. So if you've seen your partner borrow money from somebody and not pay them back, that's a red flag. That is definitely a warning to their character. So, we're talking about relationships and we're talking about marriage and really identifying who your partner and your future spouse is going to be. That is a character flaw. If somebody borrows and does not pay back, that is not somebody with integrity. Is not somebody that you want to be with long term. And then the next thing is if the person doesn't believe in investing or home ownership or long-term goals. You got to have some long-term goals. Marriage is a lot of work, day to day, week to week. And so you got to know what you're in it for. You got to know why you're working so hard, why you're taking sacrifices and what the ultimate goals are. And so oftentimes that needs to be more than just a vacation. It needs to be, hey, we need to be investing. We need to be planning for the kids' education, planning to become a homeowner, whatever the case may be. But if they don't have long-term goals, long-term financial goals, that is definitely a red flag. So if you notice these red flags, here are some things that you can do. Obviously, have a honest but judgment-free money conversation. Don't judge. Don't accuse. That is not going to fix the issue. You have to really try to keep the emotion out of it. Be open, be honest, let them know how you're feeling, but be careful not to judge them for their spending. That can cause them to shut down. That can cause them to have additional stress and pressure to where they may not want to have these conversations in the future, or they may want to hide the things that they're doing. So that will have a negative effect if you do become judgmental in these conversations. Set financial goals together and track your progress. Again, celebrate your wins together, celebrate overcoming challenges. but face your battles together as well. Seek out a financial coach or money mentor. This is important. I think, in relationships in general, one of the things that me and my wife did was when we got married, we didn't have a lot of examples of successful marriages in our life. And so we sought them out. One of the key relationships I remember going through very early in our marriage was my uncle Jamaica and my aunt Marcia. And, talking to them, we would actually write letters back and forth. They lived in the East Coast, we're on the West Coast. And so we would write letters and we'd have these conversations, and they send us a book about, relationships and things of that nature. Like, seek out those mentors for marriage, and then seek out money mentors as well. Seek out those who are already accomplishing the things that you guys want to achieve together. So if you guys want to buy a home together, talk to other homeowners and their experience, and try to get some insight and some information to make the process easier for you. If you want to invest in the stock market, talk to those who are successful in investing in the stock market and have proof. Don't just take their word for it. The good thing about talking to a homeowner, it's pretty obvious that they own their home. But when you talk to people about investing, they often talk, it's like gambling, where they talk about their wins more than they talk about their losses. So just get some honest feedback, people you can trust that are going to deliver you raw information, real information that's going to save you some headache and heartache in the future. But have those mentors in your life. I think that's a very key way to overcome some of these hurdles or potential red flags that could come up. And then know when it's time to walk away from a reckless partner. Some people say that even about marriage. Me and my wife, we're death do us part. We are in a marriage that we feel God has ordained and has put us together. And so we never look for an out. We always are looking for ways to stay together. And so we don't look at like finances as, hey, this is a reason for a divorce, right? Those are things that we have to overcome, things we need to talk about. If we need to go to counseling, whatever the case may be, that's how we would address problems when it comes to finances. But if you're early on in the relationship, you're just dating, you're trying to figure out if this is the person for you, and you're having these money conversations early, like you should be, then you're trying to figure out who they are as a person, their personality. Are they a saver, a spender, or investor? Do they have, integrity? Do they borrow money and pay it back? All these different things. If you're finding out that these are red flags and they're not willing to change or fix them, then yes, it may be time for you to just walk away and say, you know what, it's not going to work out. It's easier and it's better for you to walk away while you're dating than it is when you're married and you have kids that are involved in things of that nature. So we want to build strong marriages. We want sustained relationships. And we ultimately want households to grow their wealth. And so in order to do that, you have to be in it for the long haul. You have to address issues early and often, and you have to work together as a team. So an easy out or always having a foot out the door is not going to lead to long-term success. So just keep that in mind. Another thing that I want to talk about is how to find and keep your money match. So you're having these conversations and you're getting an understanding of who this person is, and you're finding out that, hey, you know what, this is a match for me. So how do you make sure that you stay on the same page? One of the biggest ways to do that is to set up some money habits and implement the money habits in your relationship. As your relationship grows, that you're getting more buy-in and you're becoming more serious financially. What I mean by that is, if you are currently renting your own place, they're renting their own place, and you're talking about money and spending and things of that nature, well, you guys should start putting money aside for a wedding. You guys should be putting money and start saving for a house. If you start to make those money habits together, then you'll see and you'll start to grow together. You'll have an account that's there for the future. And so you're both on the same page about your future financially. And so those are things that you can do as the relationship progresses. It doesn't mean that you need to move in together or buy, your first house together, even though you're not married, because that can lead to some difficulties as well. So keep that in mind. You want to make sure that you're tracking well, that you're looking towards the future and that you're planning towards the future, but you don't want to put yourself in a position to where you're tied to somebody when you don't need to be, when it's going to tie you down and make you make decisions that are going to impact your finances long term when you should have known that this person wasn't right for you. So don't tie yourself completely by like buying a house because it becomes very difficult to get out of that situation. Finding somebody in today's world is difficult. I understand that. I know that, it's very tough for people to find somebody that they're compatible with. I hear that the dating scene is very tough, and so I recognize that. And so one of the pieces of advice that I give to clients who may be single, friends, family members, I say go to where you would want to go with your future spouse. What I mean by that is if you want to get into investing and you want a spouse, a partner that's into investing as well, start going to investment meetups, start going to networking events that are talking about investing, whether it be real estate, stock market, whatever. Businesses, if you are interested in business, join a chamber of commerce. These are environments where you're going to meet like minded people. If you're really into saving money and investing and having a great budget in place and all these different things that make you financially responsible, chances are you're not going to find the right spouse lined up for the latest Jordans, right? So you got to go where your future spouse would be. Go to the things that interest you in hopes that you find somebody there that is also doing the same and they're on the path of doing what they love and you have a common interest there. So put yourself in those types of situations. Go to, like I said, networking, business chamber of commerce events, investment meetups and groups. Put yourself in a position to find a like-minded spouse. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about how do you find somebody in this crazy dating pool and in this dating world. Another thing I always say too is, when it comes to dating, you're going to have to put yourself in a position, especially if you're early in dating, maybe young 20s or late 20s, and trying to figure out who you truly want to be with. You're going to have to see a lot of people. Not saying that you have to do the extras, but you need to have enough experiences to know what you like and what you don't. Have enough experiences to have conversations, the tough conversations, and be able to push through them and see who's going to last, who's going to make it, who's going to be open to you having these conversations. You gotta have enough reps. I'm a big baseball fan, as you can tell from the Yankee hat. And so one of the things that I was often would talk to people in baseball about is like, if they came and said, well, how do you hit a curveball? Well, you got to see enough curveballs. You got to see them. You got to see how they're different from a fastball. You got to get enough reps. And then you can start to identify it in order to make contact and do what you need to do. Same thing when it comes to relationships. You got to have enough experiences to know what's a good partner, who has great potential, and who doesn't. You'll start to identify the red flags that we talked about from the conversations that you have. So, have those conversations early, date, and, have enough reps in your dating to really know what you want. So that way, when you do commit to a long-term partner, that you'll set yourself up for success and make sure that you're on the same page financially with your goals, with your budget, and all the other aspects of your life. So that would be my advice to those who are trying to figure out where to go when it comes to dating and getting into these relationships. But at the end of the day, your love life and your financial life are very much connected. Marrying the person that, is set financially, they're successful financially, they have goals, they have things that they're trying to obtain. All those things need to align to who you are and make sure that you have similar interests. because that's going to make your relationship work. Again, your relationship is not going to be all roses. It's not going to be a smooth path. My marriage over 19 years, we've had great times financially. We've had very low times financially. But ultimately, we've always been on the same page financially. And so that's really what helps us get through no matter what we're going through, and helps us celebrate the wins and push through as a team to fight through some of the difficulties. So that is my advice. Realize that financially, marriage and money are very much intertwined. As I talked about those statistics in the beginning, marriage will have a great impact on your household income, your generational wealth that you build. And for Black households in particular, we really got to get better. This is a crisis that we need to address because we're seeing wealth going down, we're seeing marriages go down, and we're really struggling. We're putting additional barriers in front of us. So we need to now change that pattern. We need to set the tone. Like I said, even if you don't have good marriages around you, seek them out. Go find them. Find those mentors who can help you in marriage and in money. So that's the advice that I have for today. I hope you got some great value from it. If you're watching on YouTube, I definitely want to invite you to subscribe. And if you're listening to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, definitely subscribe and share it with somebody who could benefit from this episode. I look forward to providing some more great content on the next episode. And until then, I pray that you have a blessed day. Take care.